Most people have never heard of the grain that kept West Africa alive for thousands of years. It survived droughts that killed everything else. It recovered after floods that wiped out entire harvests. It grew in soil so poor, nothing else would even try. And today, as climate change rewrites the rules of farming, scientists are scrambling to bring it back. This is the story of fonio, and why forgetting it might have been one of agriculture's biggest mistakes. We talk a lot about the crops that feed the world: wheat, rice, corn, 3 grains, billions of people, an entire global food system built around them. But here's something that should unsettle you. That level of dependence on so few crops is historically abnormal. For most of human history, communities didn't rely on 1 or 2 staples. They cultivated dozens of crops, each one adapted to a specific environment, a specific climate, a specific kind of stress. And in the semi-arid savanna zones of West Africa, the crop that anchored entire farming systems wasn't wheat. It wasn't rice. It was a grain so small, it looks like sand. Fonio, Digitaria exilis, is considered one of the oldest cultivated crops on the African continent. Archaeological evidence suggests it's been farmed for at least 5,000 years, possibly longer. But age alone isn't what makes it remarkable. What makes fonio remarkable is where it grew. Picture a farming region where the rains arrive late, or not at all, where the soil is thin, sandy, nutrient-poor, where modern staple crops would fail completely. That's where fonio thrived. It germinates fast, sometimes in just a few days. It matures in as little as 6 to 8 weeks, which in farming terms is almost unbelievably short. That speed isn't an accident. It's an evolutionary strategy. When the rainy season is short, uncertain, and unpredictable, finish fast. Get the harvest in before conditions deteriorate. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. Most crops are optimized for the best case. Give a modern hybrid wheat variety perfect soil, perfect rainfall, and perfect temperature, and it'll outperform almost anything in history. But take away those ideal conditions, yields collapse. Fonio was never optimized for the best case. It was built through generations of selection by farmers who lived and died by their harvests for the worst case. Drought hits. Fonio's shallow root system establishes quickly and pulls moisture from the upper soil layer before it evaporates. Flooding disrupts the main crop. Fonio's short growth cycle means you can replant after the water recedes and still get a harvest within the same season. Soil is depleted. Fonio doesn't demand heavy fertilization. It grows on the margins. This is what agricultural scientists now call stress tolerance. And it's becoming one of the most valuable traits a crop can have. So what happened? If fonio is this resilient, why have most people on Earth never tasted it? The answer is uncomfortable, and it tells us something important about how agricultural systems actually work. Fonio has one major mechanical problem. Its grains are tiny, extraordinarily tiny. We're talking about seeds roughly the size of a grain of sand. Processing them, threshing, dehusking, cleaning, was historically done by hand. It was skilled, time-consuming labor, mostly done by women, and it was a genuine barrier to anyone trying to produce fonio at industrial scale. When the machinery of modern agriculture arrived, it was designed around other crops, around wheat, around rice, around corn, crops that could move through a combined harvester, a grain elevator, a shipping container, a processing facility. Fonio didn't fit that system, and systems don't tend to wait for the crops that don't fit. But there's a second layer to this story that's harder to talk about. During the colonial period, export agriculture restructured farming across much of West Africa. Cash crops, cotton, groundnuts, cocoa, were prioritized for international trade. Land and labor that had supported diverse, resilient local food systems got redirected toward producing commodities for distant markets. Subsistence crops like fonio weren't exported. They didn't generate revenue for colonial economies. So they weren't supported, documented, or developed the way other crops were. Resilient didn't mean profitable, and unprofitable meant invisible. Fonio didn't disappear because it failed farmers. It disappeared because the systems around it weren't designed to keep it visible. Here's why that matters right now. We are entering a period of agricultural stress unlike anything industrial farming was built to handle. Droughts are intensifying in regions that feed hundreds of millions of people. Flooding events are becoming more frequent and more severe. Growing seasons are shifting. The predictability that modern high-yield agriculture depends on is eroding, year by year, harvest by harvest. And researchers are doing something that would have seemed counterintuitive just 20 years ago. They're going backward. They're looking at what farmers in the world's harshest environments figured out, not with modern technology, but with centuries of observation, selection, and practical knowledge. Fonio is now being studied by agricultural institutions across West Africa, Europe, and North America. Groups like Bioversity International and various West African research centers are working on mechanized processing solutions that could finally break the scale barrier. There are now Fonio dehusking machines. They're not perfect, but they exist, and they're improving. Meanwhile, chefs and food companies in Europe and the United States have started introducing Fonio to new markets. Nutritionally, Fonio delivers complex carbohydrates, dietary fiber, and a micronutrient profile that includes iron, zinc, and B vitamins. It's gluten-free. It's easy to digest. For people in grain-dependent diets, it adds variety and nutritional breadth. It's not a miracle food. No single crop is. But in food systems that have narrowed dangerously toward monoculture dependence, variety itself has value. Nutritional diversity has value. Having a backup has value. The deeper pattern here is worth sitting with. Throughout history, communities in the world's most difficult farming environments didn't try to force the land into productivity. They worked with what the land offered. They selected crops that fit the conditions, not conditions that fit the crops. That philosophy produced Fonio. It produced dozens of other grains, legumes, and tubers that we've largely forgotten. Plants that were quietly extraordinary at surviving, adapting, and feeding people under pressure. Modern agriculture went in the opposite direction. We reshaped landscapes, rerouted water, saturated soil with synthetic inputs, all to create the artificial conditions that high-yield crops require. It worked. Billions of people are fed because it worked. But it was never zero risk. And the risks are now arriving. A grain that grows in sand, matures in 6 weeks, survives drought, recovers from flood, needs no fertilizer, feeds families without headlines. That's Fonio. It didn't disappear because it couldn't perform. It disappeared because the world built a system that had no room for it. Now that system is under pressure, and the question is whether we can remember what we discarded before we need it most.